Hey YouTube, it's Faye, and for today's video, the timing belt is long overdue in my lovely little daily driver, and I'm finally getting around to it, so I figured I would also film it and make a tutorial. So for those of you who know, I have a Mark 1 Rabbit with a 2-liter AVA engine swapped in from a 3rd generation or Mark 3 Golf and Jetta. So that is today's tutorial, how to do a timing belt on a 2-liter AVA Volkswagen engine. Here goes. Okay, so I already went ahead and did all the easy stuff, so I didn't bore you with a timing belt video that's like an hour long. So I'll show you where I'm at right now. Obviously, I removed my intake tube and my air filter. I removed my drive belts, the drive pulley, the water pump pulley, and I also was able to, after pulling off the upper timing cover, I was able to remove the motor mount, and it looks like, because it's behind the timing belt, you think that you can't get it off, but actually you can without removing the timing belt, and that allows me to move the engine up and down, which makes it super easy for just accessing everything. Now, you can probably tell here, I also removed my fuel lines and picked them out of the way. You don't have to do that. I did that anyways because I didn't like the way that I had them routed, so I was going to redo them, and also I replaced my fuel filter, a bunch of other little things. Doing some maintenance today, so that's not necessary. However, it does just open everything up really nice. So you can see I've got the upper timing cover off. However, I do have the lower timing cover on still, as well as my crank pulley, because that's what I'm going to use to time the engine. Now, because my engine has really good compression, I went ahead and pulled my spark plugs out before rotating the engine over, because otherwise I would have a kind of a struggle. If your engine doesn't have great compression like mine, you can leave the spark plugs in. So, all right, here's where we're starting. Now I'm going to start by setting the engine to TDC. So I'm going to go through checking the timing marks and showing you where the timing marks are at, because they're actually pretty weird. They're not really necessarily like intuitive on this engine. So, here goes. So I've got my 19mm 12-point socket. I'm going to put on my crank pulley and turn my engine over. Okay, so here I've got it all lined up. Now for the cam, but you see how on the back of the timing cover there's OT, and that is going to line up with the OT on the cam sprocket here. Now there's also a little dot on the cam sprocket right there. That is not what you use for timing. You use this. On the crank, there's a little arrow on the timing cover there, and it lines up with that little notch, which I painted yellow there, on the crank pulley. Now on top of the transmission, you see this little plug. Actually, screw it. I'm just going to remove the whole thing and make my life a little easier. A person with a normal car should see a little 0 mark on the flywheel. Now that I have my timing marks all aligned, I'm just going to remove this stuff and jack up my engine a little bit higher so it'll be easier for me to get to. Now, even though I'm super confident in this job, I just always do this. Before I remove the belt, I always mark the direction of rotation, and then I mark the timing mark both on the belt and the pulley. And I do the same thing on the crank. And then also I can sort of stop and observe this. First of all, I can take pictures, which I will do, but then I'll also notice that this mark right here on the crank pulley is lined up pretty close with this mark, and then sort of almost perfectly with this mark in line with the teeth. So I'm going to take a picture of that, just so if something happens and I lose my mind or I panic over whether or not I've done the job right, I can always go back to square one when I know that it was working just fine. Now I've got this fancy little tool that I got from the parts place that I'm going to use to hold this tensioner in place with the one hand. While my other hand, I've got my 13 that I'm going to use to loosen the bolt. Now, can pull my timing belt off and get ready to put on my new one. Okay, next I have to remove this pulley here in order to get my water pump out. I'm doing that by putting my breaker bar with my 18mm socket, obviously on the bolt that holds the pulley on. And then right behind the pulley, there's a 13mm bolt. And I'm just putting a short 13mm socket on there to hold my pulley in place while I break that bolt loose. Now that I've got this pulley off of this shaft here, I can now remove my water pump. Okay, so now I'm going to replace my water pump, and in the past I have gotten a water pump. Like, you can just get a basic water pump from Napa or AutoZone or O'Reilly's, and you'll get a water pump that looks kind of like what I removed just now, where it's just like the front portion. Actually, here, you know, my front portion. Here's the original one that I removed. You can see it's got a metal impeller. The one that you would get from like a Napa or AutoZone actually has a plastic impeller. I get this one just for example, and some people will want to go this route, so that's why I showed this. However, whenever I do this job, in order to get a metal impeller on my water pump, I ball out and I get this, the Pro Series, the Continental timing belt kit. Because I'm a pro, right, y'all? And in this case, the water pump is insane. You get the whole frickin' dealio. That's right. You don't just get the face, but you get the whole frickin' thing. Everything but the thermostat. But my thermostat's new, so I don't care. This one doesn't actually, does it come with a thermostat? Actually, it kind of comes with everything. Oh my gosh. But it even comes with a cam seal. So I'm gonna replace my cam seal. Actually, you probably saw in the video that earlier that my cam seal was leaking. Okay, cool. So in order to replace the water pump, set this aside here, I'm gonna have to obviously remove my alternator. So I started by unhooking the battery, and let's pull my alternator off and get to this massive water pump housing. Okay, so my battery is unhooked. Now I'm gonna disconnect the wires on the back side. We've got a 13mm nuts. Jesus Christ. Just gonna unhook this connector right here, set that aside. And then I have my 8mm. And my 13mm. I'll get this one front on. Okay, and I had to jack up the car a little bit in order to remove the lower alternator bolts. Then for this guy, we've got 4 13mm bolts. Got my long socket, a little bit of an extension. Got my 19mm deep socket. Also, these are different sizes. You've got the 2 long ones at the bottom, and then these 2 are at the top. So obviously, watching this video, you're not going to forget, but it's always a good idea to, you know, mark things and note things. So now I'll be able to take that off, pull out my housing. Now, of course, I'm going to clean the surface really well before I go forward with putting on my new housing.